Hello, everyone. Welcome to SNB Podcast. I'm your host, John Sinclair. I'm a corporate strategy specialist with special focus around growth and turnaround. I've designed and deployed some of the most complex transformation programs for some of the Fortune 500 companies as well as late stage startups, most of them with tremendous success, with some setbacks. And I hope we get to share some of those lessons learned with you and hope you find them useful. Thank you. I'm really excited today because this is our number 10th episode for our podcast series. And as part of our leadership series podcast, I've got a special guest in the studio. And the topic for today's podcast is transformation leadership. So when I thought about the topic, it was an easy choice. I'm going to give you a little background about our guest today, and you can see it for yourself. So our guest today is my good friend Navindra Prem. He's the former CIO of Humana Insurance Company, and currently he's working for VMware Corporation as a transformation executive, where he advises C-suites of many Fortune 500 companies for solving some of their complex business problems and, of course, their transformation programs as well. So without further ado, let me introduce my friend, Navindra. Hello.
Hey, John.
Hey, thank you for being here, man.
Absolutely. I appreciate the warm welcome.
Thank you.
And I think you missed the most important job that I've held in my career. I started in the mailroom, and I'd love to tell you more about that, but it sort of sets the stage for our conversation today.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
I got to know more about that.
Yeah.
So thanks, bud.
Yeah.
All right. So when we were thinking about the topic for today's discussion, one of the things that I was thinking about, the topic today is transformational leadership. So, Lavindra, seriously, as I was thinking about this topic, your name came immediately to my mind. For our viewers, just to give you a quick background. So, I met Navindra through a friend, but actually we met even before. You were my customer at one point.
Humana. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So
Yeah.
at that time, it was purely a business relationship, but of course, later on, we became friends. One thing that really stood out about you when we first met, it's your authenticity and also how caring you are, and when you talk about your team, your customers, the level of passion you demonstrate, right? That is something that really resonated well with me. And I think that's one of the reasons why we became friends.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Having said that, are you ready to get going?
I am. Let's do it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So since the topic today is transformation leadership, one of the things that's really important is the leadership trait.
Yeah.
So there are different leaders that embraces different type of leadership trait. Is there anything specific that stands out for you that that is something that you have been leveraging? And I'd love to know more about that. Would you like to share with us?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think you said it. Authenticity, I think, is super important for me personally, right? I feel like I have certain sets of characteristics that were given to me, right? And I appreciate the opportunity to just be real with that and just true to myself and my nature. And certainly putting people first. Again, having started in the mailroom, I know what it's like when you're the recipient of not the best leadership styles.
Right.
And so I've learned not only just from textbook, obviously, but from real life experience and wisdom, how to treat people with respect and integrity and, those things, right?
Of course. Which is a natural transition to leadership style, right? And of course, over the last couple of decades that I work with so many leaders and I've seen their different leadership style, there's no right or wrong. Some are good, some are great, and some of them are just downright dangerous, right? So I'd love to hear, your view on this and what's your specific style. If there's one specific or there's multiple, that's okay.
Yeah, my default tends to be servant leadership.
Okay.
Right? So you're correct. I mean, based on the situation in any given opportunity or job or situation, you have to oscillate between the variety of different styles, right? But for me, people first, and if I really want to be able to serve my teams at the end of the day. Like I remember when I was starting in my career, and I may have had an idea or I may have had an ambition. The leaders that really enabled me to unleash that and put me first and gave me everything that I needed to succeed are the ones that are still stuck in my memory till this day. I hold them in high regard, and I want the same. When I'm afforded an opportunity to lead a team, that's exactly what I want to do for others.
Excellent. By the way, I've seen, even though I met you for a short period of time at Humana, I definitely, this was very visible. Your presence, your leadership style was very much, visible.
I
So
appreciate
just,
that.
yeah, of
Thank you.
course. So to the next question that I think about is, leadership is all about making decisions, right? Some are
Hmm.
good, some are okay, and some of them are really complex, really tough decision. Um, and as leaders, we all have to make those decisions, but some of them comes with significant price,
That's right.
right? Almost when you're going through an organizational change or transformation, almost any decision will be some level of disruption. But there's a difference between disruption and being destructive, right?
Absolutely.
And being in the industry for the last several decades, one thing I realized, not all, but some leaders still decides to go with some of those destructive
Yeah.
decisions, right? And I know it has, significant impact to the employee and their psyche.
Absolutely.
So, can you share with us, a situation where you were in that type of decision, you had to make a complex or
Yeah.
difficult decision, and what was the impact and what lesson you walked away with?
Yeah, one that sticks out for me is one of my prior experiences. We had a situation, it was a business justified situation where the revenue had declined to the point that we had to adjust our cost base, right? And, we were able to identify areas that we believe we can sort of make the adjustments, but continue to operate our business. Um, what I found personally, you're right. There are leaders that just make a decision based on the black and white aspects, the binary aspects of business, right? These are just numbers. But
Sure.
there's people behind these numbers, the people that have put their sweat and tears into and their commitment to the company. You can't take that lightly, right? And so I certainly remember there was a situation where and it really, for me, it really pulled on my heartstrings, right? We jump on the corporate jet, a $35 million jet, and we're going to lay off a couple hundred people. It just, all of it just from the onset felt wrong. And then as we approached how we were going to, make the decisions and how we are going to convey the messages to the folks that were impacted, for a lot of the folks that I was surrounded by, I'm not sure if they were coming from a place of ego or maybe sometimes that's a coping mechanism. Some people just can't deal with that reality of, I'm going to make a tough decision that's going to impact a person, their family, their spouses, their children. But for me, I wanted to be able to show up real to every single one of those situations, show a lot of empathy, and make sure that I did it in the most humane way possible. And the way I did that personally is I said to myself, the person that I'm sitting in front of, how would I deliver this message if they were my mother?
Wow.
How would I deliver this message if they were my sister, my brother, my friend? Those are the tools that I used to make sure that I came across in the most authentic, real, humane way possible with tough decisions.
Wow, that's really insightful. And my observation has been similar in the last couple of decades, right? I remember there was a similar situation. I was in my one of my jobs at an executive offsite, seven CIOs, and we're building our plan for the upcoming year. And of course, part of that, there was some level of cost containment or cost takeout was being discussed. And not all, but several of them, they raised their hand, showcasing, how good they were in laying off people. Um, it kind of caught me by surprise. And as I hear from you that the empathy that you demonstrate, right? That how you felt, the way you framed it, that what if this person was my sister, my brother, a friend, how would I be, handling this level of empathy and self-awareness? And I felt like some, not all, some leaders definitely lack that,
That's right.
right? They almost look at it like this is nothing more than an Excel spreadsheet exercise. You're just gonna do this, cross some names, and you move on, right? And I think that is extremely important for leaders to have empathy,
That's right.
right? And one of the things that I think almost everybody misses is that it's not the exercise of letting people go. what is the impact to the remaining employee? How how will they trust you? Would you agree? I mean, if they
Absolutely.
felt,
Absolutely.
yeah, because whatever you're doing this round of layoff,
Yeah.
the people that are remaining, they may, breathe easy for the moment, but they're also paying attention that how their colleagues and their peers being treated,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And if this is being done with such cold-hearted manner,
Yeah.
what do you think it does to those people?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not in the business of sort of judging my peers. I
Correct.
think everybody has their own individual personal journeys, and
Sure.
that has resulted in who they are, right? The only thing I can control is me,
Yes.
right? And so what I try to do is I try to demonstrate, leadership qualities that align with my own personal values, in
Correct.
hopes that it'll rub off on someone else. If it does, that's great. If it doesn't, that's also fine. But for the areas that I've been personally involved with, I try to demonstrate that to the best of my ability.
No, absolutely. Thank you. No, that is really informative, and I think our viewers will find it really interesting. All right. So the next thing that I kind of think about is, as leaders, you're always dealing with some level of change, some level of transformation, right? And the time, the era that we're in, no company has all full-time employees, so you have a mixture of some contractors, some outsourcing, and of course some internal employees. So that means anytime you're doing embarking on a transformation programs, you'll have to rely on some vendors.
Try.
And I found that to be quite a few times in my career a complex exercise. And I'll qualify that what I mean. That oftentimes you're working with a vendor on a technology that you feel is the right, so let's just say a digital transformation, right? Perhaps it's an analytics vendor, right? It could be a machine learning vendor, right? And you spend significant amount of time with this vendor, and you think you guys have a plan, and now it's time to onboard the vendor. And of course, naturally, the company has their policies of how they procure vendors, and all of a sudden you realize you don't really have much choice because the company may have a policy where they're going to be looking for the cheapest vendor, cheapest provider,
That's right.
or it could be balance of trade, right? Or it could be you have to select a list of vendor that's part of that approved vendors list, and this company that's emerging, up and coming company that's dealing with some complex technology may not be part of that
Yeah,
list. So now you're kind of stuck, right?
that's right. Yeah.
And what do you do? I mean, at this point, like you spend all this time, all this effort, and you're ready to go with your program, and now the company's telling you, well, these are the criteria in which you get to decide which
That's
vendor you
right.
work with.
That's right.
So how do you deal with something like that?
I've been there many times,
Okay.
right? And so I remember when I was at Pfizer, one of the executives there told me something that literally has served me very well in my career. He said, "Look, we're not in the business of making sense. We're in the business of making drugs." And like so, as somebody that always looked at things from an sort of a critical thinking perspective, this makes sense, logical on paper. That's not how businesses operate, right? And so, if you think about it, right, like we don't get to pick our mother, our brother, our sister. Like those things are given to us, and so you just the only thing you can do is best deal with the cards that you're dealt. Now, reality too, as leaders, is as we go from one company to another, we sort of create an ecosystem around us of trusted partners and vendors that can deliver for us. And I certainly would look for those opportunities to bring them in. It may not be the one specific opportunity that I want to get after, but if I can get them in to demonstrate their ability, then eventually that'll become viral, and then eventually they'll get to the place that I want them to get to. So it requires humility, patience. You have to work within the flow of the system. Don't try to like disrupt the system, because the system will reject you for that.
Of course, of
Yeah.
course. A good point.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So the next topic, it's kind of like near and dear to my heart because I've been in both sides of the fence, right? And I think you too. I work for management consulting firms, but I also work for the consumer side, the customer, right?
That's right.
Where I was procuring the service of the same companies, and then I went back and I was selling the services to my former employers, right? So this is also a challenging exercise, right? So as a leader, it's not like you always get the wish of working with a consulting firm or systems integrator that you have great experience with,
That's
as
right.
we just talked about in the previous question, right? Sometimes you're limited by which vendors you can work with.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this. Where do you think that consulting companies are most effective, right? Do you think they're effective in introducing structure to your
Hmm.
organization to
Hmm.
get things done in a methodic way, something that is more measurable? Do you think they're good at supplying staffing, specialty staff, engineering staff, project management? You think they're good at that? Or you think they're good at helping you driving growth of your business?
Yeah, I quite honestly have seen them all, right?
Okay.
But it's all about context, right?
Okay.
So if you think about the reason you would go to a management consultant firm, typically organizations are looking for an insurance policy, right? So we don't want to come up with plans that are just executed from a myopic sort of view of just within the company. You want to bring in the experts from the outside that have seen what you're going through in many other places, and they can quickly apply sort of what they've learned in terms of lessons learned, right? But then there's an opportunity, certainly, to, depends on the circumstance and the situation. There's an opportunity to insert yourself into that body of work. And I think that's super critical as a leader. Sometimes you abdicate, right? And you just give complete control to one of these consultancies. One, they're in the business of making money, right? So they're in the business of serving their own interest, which is not bad. That's what we all do, right? But you have to make sure that your interests, your vested interest, are heard, spoken, incorporated, synthesized, and part of the plan. Ultimately, that's like the recipe for the ultimate success. And so this way you don't feel like you're completely out of control. But yeah, absolutely. I think it's just all of that you described.
So, so let me make sure that what I understand is having a joint vested interest in the outcome, right? It's a real
Absolutely.
partnership and not solely relying on them hoping they're going to deliver the outcome.
You got it. Yeah.
Okay,
And
got it.
look, I mean, I personally, it's again about human interaction and relationships and connections. And so these are just people just like you and I,
Correct.
in all of these various roles and seats. And so you have to make that connection with them and convey to them the importance of making sure that what you want to accomplish is also synthesized and incorporated into what they're doing.
So this brings me to a something that happened to me quite some time ago. Probably I would say maybe about 15 or maybe even 17 years ago. Um, so I was actually working for a specialty insurance company, and as part of their divestiture strategy in the U.S., and they had a whole bunch of small insurance company. They wanted to just collapse them into the most profitable one and get rid of the rest, right? That didn't function well for them, right? So this is the first generation. This is EMC, VMware, ESX 1.0. This is like a lot of companies were very nervous.
That's right.
They didn't want to touch it. They're like, "Whoa, this is we don't know if this. Yeah, it sounds good, good promise, but not sure what it does." But mind you, this is at that time just ESX, right?
Yeah.
It didn't have all these, advanced hypervisor, cloud readiness. None of that was there at that time. So I remember here. So it was very difficult to even find skill set in the marketplace. So one of the things that I was doing as part of the transformation program to do all the consolidation for all their data center for all these multiple insurance companies. So of course, I had to convince the leadership that we have to go with, virtualization. That's the only way that's going to give us the density we want. And they still wanted to maintain the location in Times Square. So that's a very expensive real estate. And so it made a tremendous business sense. So we had to rely on um, a number of external vendors, right, that had subject matter expertise. So the challenge I saw, and I'm sure that is not unique to that situation. I've seen it many times when I was in IBM or Accenture, that what happened by bringing in all these experts, I noticed within the few months, the employees of the company felt demoralized. They felt like they were not part of this
That's
future,
right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because they felt like they were just observer, right, as a spectator in this journey, and they didn't know what the future held for them.
Yeah.
Some were smart enough to jump in. They wanted to shadow and learn. Some just did not know what to do.
Yeah.
And that was and I remember that was a tricky situation. Um, and my role was to, is a purely on the business outcome, right? I was given a role of saying, you've got this period of time, you have to collapse all these, data centers and bring them into, we want N plus one. We don't want 12. I think they have 12 or 13 data centers. They wanted to have an N plus one architecture, right?
Yeah.
And I remember this was the side effect, unintended consequence of that. And that happens a lot, even any transformation program you do.
Yeah.
So what has been your experience, and what have you done to make sure that you don't end up with a demoralized workforce?
Yeah, I've been there many times, right?
Okay.
And I'll cite an example from ADP. So I was part of their business transformation team. It was a very small team, and we reported directly into the CEO. And look, preservation, self-preservation is a human instinctual response. You just have to accept that and understand that, right? And when you're trying to bring in a change to a company, the immediate reaction is, I don't know what this is. It's scary, fear, all of those basic instincts sort of percolate, right? Your job as a leader is to get in front of that, right? So for me, what I did personally is I'm a big fan of co-ideation, co-creation. You may have a partner, you may have a vendor that knows the process. They've done this many times elsewhere. You want your people inserted intimately into that process so that their voice is heard, their ideas are heard, their ideas are incorporated. It may not be perfection, but it's going to be progress. And then this way you're going to be able to bring forward the team with you versus having something inflicted upon them. Nobody wants that, right? So that's the way I've approached it.
I like that. I think this is terrific. It makes a lot of sense because this happens a lot, and I think this is the unintended consequence of the rapid pace of transformation. And I
Sure.
think a lot of leader talks about it, but I've seen when it comes to rubber meets the road, when there come times for execution, this almost always happens, right?
Look, as a leader, you sometimes just fall in love with the end state vision too,
Correct.
right? And you have to catch yourself because
Correct.
I've done this enough times to know that no transformation is ever perfect. It takes time, and there's a change curve associated with that. So you don't want to alienate the folks that are doing the work. You want them to be a part of whatever the future state's going to look like, and then you want to be open and transparent that possibly there's going to be some adjustments to the org model and the way that we operate, and so we're going to care for our people in the proper way when we get to that juncture. But jump on board. Let's get this done together as one team, and that usually resonates very well.
Awesome. All right. So post COVID, the last few years, we kind of got used to working remote. Um, but I'm one of those old school business leader where I look at like it's all about building relationship. And I'm a firm believer that there's no substitute for building that type of a meaningful, lasting relationship, where you look, a lot of my former customers are actually my friends. I get invited
Okay,
to
good.
their children's wedding or some big events, right? So those are the kind of relationships I've built over the years, right? And I feel like that what has happened in the last few years, I hear from a lot of my sales colleagues, they tell me, yeah, we're closing business, but it's really difficult to connect. It's
Yeah,
difficult to read the room. It's difficult to really, become that trusted advisor.
yeah.
So how are you? What's your observation and how are you dealing with this?
Yeah, look, I remember, being on the other side as a customer. It's kind of like dating, right? Like if somebody's just talking about themselves and they're not listening to you and what your needs are, and really being empathetic about it, you get turned off. You're just like, I don't want to have this conversation, right? For me, what I do is I practice the skill of essentially gain an intimacy with my customers to understand them not just at a business level, but I want to understand them as a human, as in terms of what makes them tick. Not because I want to close a sale. Like that's going to be the natural byproduct of forming a genuine, authentic, real relationship with another human being. Look, the brick and mortar of these companies is nothing without the people within it. So for me, I want to keep it people first. I want to keep it about creating genuine, authentic relationships. Does it work every single time? Absolutely not. But over time, people learn to trust you, and then they let you into their safe space, and then you're able to show the value, demonstrate the value, and be able to get to close the deal.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've observed that affected almost all industries, a lot of my industry peers and almost different all sorts of businesses is finding the right kind of talents.
Yeah.
And I think it's as a result of the great resignation, right? And I'm sure it impacted your customers, I'm sure your
Absolutely.
your peers. So it's a twofold question. One is there's many opinions out there, right? I actually had a full episode talk about this in great detail.
Yeah.
And there's many opinions from Harvard Business Review to you name it, from New York Times, Wall Street Journal. They all have an opinion. What they think is the real root cause is. So, so two things, right? What do you think is the root cause? That's just miraculously that this labor force just disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the second piece is, what do you think that has to change or has to happen for us to bring everything back to normal?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think people, COVID, right? Reminded everybody of their mortality. Like the reality is we're not here forever. And then so when you're faced with a situation as seismic as COVID has been to the planet, it wasn't isolated. Everybody was in the same boat. It makes you think, like, hey, I get up every day and I do whatever it is that I do. Am I like feeling fulfilled with my limited time that I have on this planet? I really do believe genuinely that that's the at the root, at the most basic level, that's what spawned all of the sort of thoughts for folks that were in the workforce. I think I want to leave the city life, the hustle and bustle. I want to go to a remote location and live a more simple life. You certainly have an aging workforce. That's a factor, right? And then there's certainly talent war, especially in technology, as technology is not getting any simpler. It's getting more and more complicated. And so finding the skills in the niche folks to do these things, there's a war for that. There's a competition for that. But ultimately, I think the Great Resignation itself was rooted in sort of just basic human, hey, am I feeling good about what I'm doing every day? Do I feel fulfilled? I really do believe that.
I agree with you on that, and I have lived through this for quite some years, and while this is a prevalent issue today, but it didn't happen just today.
No.
This started a long ago. I think that COVID-19 just accelerated this. It was going to happen eventually, it's just a matter of time, but I think it just accelerated their process. And all of a sudden, I think it gave people this sudden realization and saying, am I fulfilled?
Okay.
Is this what I really want to do? Right. Right before we were coming here today, and I just, my phone, I just saw there was a friend of mine just sent me this article, and it says, it's a big issue in India because this is one of the capital for all the outsourcing, right? You got all these big TCS, Infosys, and all these big companies out there, and they're all dealing with employees having a second job or the side hustle, and it's a huge problem, right? Because now, I mean, what do you do? Because almost every company I know, that one of the things when you take a new job, it says you cannot have another full time job anywhere else, right? But this is a huge problem right now,
Yeah.
and I think. Well, primary reason I think it kind of is aligned to what you just said, that people are not fulfilled.
You got it.
And I think this COVID-19 remote working created that opportunity where they no longer are time bound or time zone bound, right? Meaning you could be a New York employee working, 9 to 5 Eastern, but then you may have a side gig to a different time zone. And because there's no managers, watching your back, you could pretty much have a second job, right?
That's right.
And I think, again, I don't believe, a lot of people think that this is purely driven by greed or they want to make extra money. I don't believe that.
No.
I think it's purely because people are just not fulfilled. They're looking for the next challenge. They're trying to see what else is out there.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. So, I firmly believe that these side hustles and these other jobs that we're hearing about that people have, a lot of that, we as corporate leaders, right, we create situations, we create environments that can either make people feel comfortable and feel secure, or we can uh, basically trigger the worst responses from a human nature perspective, right? So people feel like they have to lean into their fight or flight sort of response, right? So I believe these side hustles and things that you're seeing are people just trying to diversify their income, diversify revenue stream, just like a company would, just because of the environmental factors that we're dealing with. And COVID also is a factor. I mean, I think it was a little bit of a wake up call for many folks to say, all right, I'm doing this thing every single day. I went to school for it. I kind of trained my entire life for it. Do I really like it? I mean, and so maybe there's something else that I need to do as well, in addition to what I do for my day job, to make me feel more whole and complete.
Of course. Now that makes a lot of sense. All right. So so far, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good, good. I'm really enjoying this conversation. So one of the things that I've been thinking about for quite some time, I'm one of those people. I'm not genetically very gifted, right? I mean, I get in shape really, really good, then I would completely fall off the wagon, and I can actually say it from my personal perspective. I can actually say my performance level for my ability to recall information, be alert,
Yeah.
and how it was when I was an absolute fantastic physical, mental, spiritual shape versus when I'm completely out of shape, right? I can feel the difference, right? And I think this is true for all leaders. And you will see a lot of these, like perfect example is Jeff Bezos. I was watching this video in YouTube, and I think he's just giving a casual meeting, or maybe a town hall type setting, and he's standing there with the jeans and a white shirt, but you could see the posture. The man is in phenomenal shape, right? And so success of the companies, it's no accident. And that's just one example. I've met many leaders. They're in phenomenal physical, mental shape. And you leave the room and thinking, my God, how is this guy able to speak for an hour without missing a beat and able to recall all this information and able to, even after the meeting, shaking hand with all these employees and recall
Yeah.
everyone's name? Something,
Yeah.
by the way, I struggle a lot. And so this topic is really important for me, and I was actually thinking about having an entire, podcast session just on that peak performance, right?
Yeah.
So you are somebody, and we've been talking, and one thing that it really impressed me about you that I like is how calm you are. You're extremely calm. By the way, I'm not, right? Uh, and I know we spoke about this earlier, and you are somebody who you make a conscious effort to stay in shape, not just physical but also mental. But I know it's also spirituality is extremely important for you.
It is very
And I
important.
think these three things are extremely important for all leaders, because if you're not in the best a mental, physical, and spiritual shape, you're not going to be useful to your team.
Yeah.
It's just simple as that.
Yeah.
So why don't you share with us some of your experience? What is it that you do on a daily basis? Because just for myself,
Absolutely.
I'd love to copy some of that.
Well, look, I'm not, the ultimate sort of example of what that should be, but I do my very best, right?
Sure.
My own personal philosophy, quite frankly, is when I think about, my passions, my goals, my dreams, right? There's only one instrument that's going to allow me to achieve that. It's going to be my mind, body, and soul. And that's collectively as what you see in front of you, right? So I have to care for this entire package. I can't, expect to just be running 155 miles an hour and not change the oil and not do the things that are needed to sustain the distance, the entire sort of race. And so, I also learned early in my career, as we sort of chase after our goals, you get to one hill, then you get to the next hill, and you get to the next hill, and you're like, okay, I thought I was going to be happy when I got to that first hill. Got to the second hill. Maybe that's where I'm gonna become happy. Nope. You get to the third hill. Nope. The happiness that you need to achieve and experience in life comes from within you. It's not after all of these goals, that allows you to feel fulfilled, but it doesn't really complete you, as a human being, right? And so I had to sort of take inventory of like, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Um, I kind of stumbled upon meditation, quite frankly, and it's been the best thing ever for me personally. And the best way to describe that is like we all have a lot of chatter in our mind. We're thinking about, well, what am I going to have for dinner? What am I going to have here? What do I have? That's, if you think about like, CPUs, that's soaking up a lot of processing power. For me, meditation has allowed me to shut down the mind and allow to unleash the entire capacity that I have towards the specific areas that I want to go after, right? And so it keeps me grounded. It keeps me very calm. I appreciate that. I can't say that I completely understand the science behind it, but there's a lot of theories. And so I certainly do that every day. I try to start my day. I get up pretty early. If I'm up around 4:35, I try to spend 1 hour solid during doing
You do
meditate.
meditation for an
I
hour?
try.
Wow.
The operative word is try.
Okay.
I'm not always able to do that, but I got to get some time in. It's like going to the gym. I have to get some time in terms of just calming myself down and centering myself. And then I try to do that, late evening. I'm not much of a sleeper, so if I'm going to bed at 12 or 1, I'm trying to capture some moments there to do that. Um, Actually, my meditation has allowed me to not require as much sleep,
Really?
which has been a natural sort of byproduct of it as well. In terms of physical, certainly, I try to operate with whatever, I've been given. So I try to exercise a couple of times a week. I do a lot of, what they call HIT, high intensity training sort of exercises where I can get something in that's intense. in a very short period of time. And then I do that, and then I go about my business, right? So that sort of covers the body. And then the mind is, I think there's enough sort of intellectual diversity in terms of what we do that for me personally, like in the areas that I have a lot of interest, I feel stimulated. I feel more than satisfied. And so in that regard, I feel pretty good. So, but yeah, you got to hit on all of it. You can't just like keep running, keep going, and the car's trying to barely dragging its way to kind of keep pace with the driver, right? So
Of course. No,
yeah.
this is really insightful. But I have to ask you, a lot of my friends ask me about meditation, and they're very confused about which one to do. Is there any specific, like I know some people, I remember I spent a lot of money myself. I did transcendental meditation. And then now I finally settled into, the guided meditation, which works well for me.
Yeah.
Um, so what, because it doesn't look like you do guided. So you must have any specific style?
Yeah, my go-to is a Buddhist meditation. It's called Nichiren Buddhism, and it's
Nitra, N-I-T-R.
Nichiren,
Okay,
and basically it's based on the concept of energy centers within your body and being able to recite a sort of a mantra to be able to align the energy centers. That's my go-to, and whenever I do that, I feel lit up within like 5-10 minutes.
really?
Me personally, right? I do also love Kriya. Kriya is an ancient Indian meditation practice. That takes time. You really have to invest, like if you have time over the weekend to really get to that place that you would desire to get in terms of that one meditation practice. Um, Look, I sometimes feel like when I'm exercising, I'm meditating, right? Like if I can focus on the exercise and not focus on the thoughts in my head, that's a form of meditation. There's all different sorts of forms of meditation. So don't think that there's just one avenue,
Okay.
one solution. You got to feel around a little bit for the one that sort of resonates with you and that you feel most comfortable with.
No, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that covers our session today. So, Navindra, thank you so much for
Thank you,
being
my
here.
friend. I appreciate it.
I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure our viewers will find it equally as exciting.
Yeah.
I hope you come back again because one of the things that I talked about that we're going to have a full episode around peak performance, and I think it'd be amazing to talk about this specific topic in more greater detail.
You're a good friend,
Thank you.
right? So absolutely, I love spending time with you.
Thanks, pal. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. If you like this episode, please give it a like, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe. It helps us with that Google algorithm. And your feedback is essential for us to help develop the next content, next episode. So please keep those feedback coming and hope to see you on our next episode. Have a wonderful time.